Good afternoon and welcome to our show. My name is Geraldine Clark and I'll be your host for this particular segment. And I'd like to welcome to our show Larry Hamm, who is the founder of POPS, which stands for
People's Organization for Progress.
Yes. And Larry and I have known each other for many years, more years than we're going to talk about. However, both of us are members of the New Jersey Black Issues Conference.
Yes.
And so for many years, we have been talking about issues that affect the African American black community. And so today we're going to continue that discussion.
Good.
And one of the things that we like to talk about is what's happening right now in our economy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is talking about Occupy Wall Street protests, the banks, what happened with Wall Street, the failure. All of this is something that we've known has been happening in our community and known about it for many years. But now all of a sudden, the media just seems to be having a field day talking about the economy, the financial meltdown of our finances. You know, our former governor, I saw he's in the hot seat down in Washington talking about what he knows and what he doesn't know. And so let's get into a little discussion about what's actually happening with this financial meltdown. The jobs, where have all the jobs gone?
Well, we are facing a very serious situation in our community. This current economic crisis, which really became full-blown in 2008, has had a devastating impact in terms of unemployment. Right now, if we go by the official figures, there are about 16 million Americans unemployed. But those figures do not count the people whose unemployment benefits have run out. Because that's how they count unemployment.
Right.
When you're on unemployment, you're receiving benefits, you're counted among the unemployed. But when your unemployment benefits run out, you don't get another extension, you're off the rolls. So there may be as many as 26 to 29 million people in this country either unemployed or underemployed. And that's very serious. And in addition to that, census figures came out recently showing that nearly 1/3 of the American population now lives below, at, or near the poverty line. So this crisis is very serious. A financial crisis. The first serious manifestation was the near bank failures, and then Bush bailed out the banks and President Obama bailed them out again, but there hasn't been any bailout for the people. So we have, in the state of New Jersey, 9.5% unemployment rate. That's less than 0.5% less than depression level unemployment. When we hit 10%, that's depression level unemployment. Here in the city of Newark, the official unemployment rate is 15%, so that's 1.5 times depression level. And if we count the people whose unemployment benefits have run out and who have stopped looking for a job because they were looking for so long and they haven't found one and they're just frustrated, we may have as high as a 25 to 30% unemployment rate here in the city of Newark. In the last 2 years, 2 million people have lost their homes due to financial foreclosure. This is more people than in the previous 50 years combined. And one of the significant characteristics of this foreclosure crisis is half the 2 million have been black people. This has been the greatest loss of black wealth since emancipation. Because most black people are not millionaires, don't even make six figures. You know, most folks that they got a little bit of money is tied up in their homes. And people have lost, 1 million black folks have lost their homes. And there may be in total another 1 million foreclosures in the coming year. This is the most serious economic crisis that we have had since the Great Depression. And it seems to be an ongoing crisis. As a matter of fact, everybody's holding their breath now to see what's going to happen in Europe, to see whether the euro is going to fail, to see whereas if Greece is going to default on the payments of its loans, what's going to happen with Italy, and then next Spain. Spain has an official government unemployment rate of 25%. So this is a worldwide economic crisis that's having a particular effect on the black community. Now, it's interesting, black folks for the last almost half century have been in a permanent state of depression because our unemployment figures are always twice the official government unemployment. We have what's called structural unemployment. So if we accept the 8.6% unemployment rate the government is now saying it is, that's still 17% for black people. That's still more than 1.5 times depression level unemployment. So while we've been feeling this on and on through the last few decades, this crisis now has become full blown and has gone into the majority community, the white community. And I think that's why we see now more focus by the media on this, because now, you know, many of the economic problems that were mainly relegated to the black, the poor, and other people of color are now having a major impact on the white community in this country. But nonetheless, we need all the attention we can garner on this problem, because what people will do, they will try to shift the spotlight. See, what was good about the Occupy Wall Street movement is that it changed, at least momentarily, the political discourse. Whereas people were talking mainly about bailing out the banks, banks too big to fail, and deficits, and we got to balance the budget. Occupy Wall Street changed that and started to talk about economic injustice. For instance, why do corporate CEOs, the average corporate CEO in America makes $690,000 a year and the average worker makes $690,000 a week, and the average worker $700 a week? The ratio of CEO to worker pay is higher in the United States than any of the other industrialized countries in the world. And the gap between the rich and the poor in this country is wider than it's ever been. And the middle class is being thrown, some of them not down into the working class, they're going down to the poverty line. So it's a very serious crisis, and it's one which we've tried to address. The People's Organization for Progress, we started a campaign on the 27th of June for jobs, peace, equality, and justice. And we've been engaged in daily protests. This was months before the Occupy Wall Street movement, which, by the way, we support, but months before we started our daily protests for jobs. And today will be the 171st consecutive day of protests. And we plan to continue these protests for 381 days, which was the length of the Montgomery bus boycott. And we really want people to come out and join us.
Okay, now you mentioned this particular protest, but having known a little bit about POP, you've been doing protesting for 28 years.
That's correct.
And so when you speak about poverty, that is one of your main issues that you've always been talking about, creating better jobs, creating better health care, creating better schools, education, and such. And when you were talking a few minutes ago about unemployment, it occurred to me that when you said that they're only counting those people who have had a job and are no longer working, and the people who, once they get off those roles, they're not counted. But what about the people who never got on either one? You know, you have a whole system of people who are on welfare. You have a whole bunch of people who are coming out of the prison system who don't get jobs. You have the black market, the underclass jobs that are out there where people have been working for years, never made it onto anyone's actual role as far as an employment. So now you look at that in the people of color community, you know, because you go to, I live in Hudson County. It is nothing, I mean, to go up into Bergen County, which is supposed to be an affluent community, and on almost every street corner you see a group of men standing there waiting to get hired for day labor. So those people aren't even counted at all. So when we talk about what's happening in America, it seems like people of color, period, are being left out. That they're not really being included. So now we mentioned the housing industry. We know that that was a balloon ready to pop years ago. but because so many, not just people of color, well, I call everybody a person of color. I don't understand how they separate white people from
Right.
everybody else, but I did hear once that white was a concept that wasn't a color.
It is.
So, you know,
It's a social construct,
a social construct,
not an anthropological
right.
construct.
But so many people have lost their housing, and as I said before, I was watching this movie, and I think it was in Oklahoma or Arkansas, someplace out west actually, and they were showing how many people were losing their homes, and the banks were actually paying the people who they were putting out of the house to come in and clean out the house that you're getting evicted out of, just so that they didn't have to pay another entity to do that. So when you're asking, well, who's going to help? It doesn't seem like the people who can help are doing anything to actually help.
Right. Well, I saw an episode like that too. Maybe we saw the same thing. It was a scene from Michael Moore's Capitalism, a Love Story. That's right, in which I would tell people to go and get and see that movie.
It's an excellent movie.
And yes, what you have just said unfolds how much more serious this crisis is, other than the way people have been painting it. Now, you have some folks, you know, like the folks that are trying to seek the Republican nomination for president, who would say it's not as bad as what the government says. But
they've been saying that for years.
That's right. But what you just said shows us how deep this crisis really is, how many people are not being classified by the government, how many people are not being counted, how many people are in the underground economy.
Right.
All of this points to the magnitude of this problem. And of course, government will try to diminish the problem, you know, but we're at a point now, I don't think that people can hide anymore. We're at a point similar to where we were 40 years ago, actually maybe more like 50 years ago, when Dr. King began to talk not only about civil rights, but began to talk about poverty in America. And he talked about Michael Harrington's book, The Other America. It was a little book, but it was a book that summed up the plight of the poor in the United States. Because all around the world, you know, America was portrayed as the land where the streets were paved with gold, you know. And then when Michael Harrington came out with this book, it showed, in fact, another side of America, where people don't have an American dream, they have an American nightmare. So we're kind of like in that state right now. You know, in fact, the gap between the rich and the poor is twice as wide today as it was in 1968, when Dr. King said we needed to have a poor people's movement and a poor people's march on Washington. In fact, the Occupy Wall Street effort, the Occupy Wall Street movement, really draws some of its inspiration from the Resurrection City.
Right.
Remember when Dr. King, he was assassinated, but they marched on Washington and they set up tents.
Right, exactly.
They set up a tent city for the poor, and it was called Resurrection City. Because Dr. King, his plan actually was to bring, he was going to have the first Million Man March. Right. He was going to bring 1 million people to Washington, D.C., and he said this is in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community. He was going to bring the Negroes, that's what we used back, that was the current word back then, the Negroes from the ghettos.
I still hear people using it.
Right, the Latinos from the barrios, the Native Americans from the reservations, and the poor whites from Appalachia. They were going to bring 1 million people to Washington, D.C., and engage in massive nonviolent civil disobedience. They were going to shut it down until Congress passed what Dr. King called an Economic Bill of Rights, which was not an original concept, because Franklin Roosevelt, during the Depression, in fact, before he died, he also started talking about an Economic Bill of Rights, that every American had a right to a job that paid a living wage, had a right to decent housing, had a right to education, had a right to health care. Some people have been talking about universal health care, but this was one of the planks in Dr. King's agenda of the Poor People's Campaign, universal health care. All the other industrialized countries have it. We don't. Our next door neighbor, Canada, has universal health care. We don't have it here. We have 47 million people in this country who have no health insurance. A third of the population living at or near poverty. We have 35 million homeless people in this country. I mean, it's a disgrace in a country this rich to have people living this way. And not just the poor and the abject poor, but the state of working people. Working people's real wages have not increased in this country since 1978. Now, even though your dollar figure may be more than what the number of dollars you were making each week in 1978, what you can actually buy with your greater number of dollars is less than you could have bought with the dollars you had in 1978. In fact, because of inflation, our dollars today are only worth about half what they were worth in 1967. This is a serious problem. It is affecting the quality of life. And then our young people. We are putting our young people into really what could only be called debt slavery. The young people who do the right thing, who graduate from high school, who go to college, get a 4-year degree, 2-year degree, come out, number one, they can't find a job.
That's it.
All those smiling faces at the graduation this past spring are now frowning faces because many of those young people cannot find a job. But on top of that, that is compounded by the fact that they have graduated with $25, $30, $40, $50, maybe even $100,000 worth of student loans just for their undergraduate education. They will die, many of them, before they actually pay those loans off. Our position is, one of the things, as I said, we've been protesting on a daily basis, and we're protesting for really 6 core things. We have other demands, but 6 core demands. One, we think there should be a national jobs program like we had during the Depression to put people back to work now at jobs at a living wage. A living wage is a union wage. And there's plenty of work to be done. We can fix the roads, fix the bridges, fix the public works, the sewer systems, the infrastructure, build housing. There's plenty of work to be done. Many people don't know that the Newark City subway that they ride every day, that was a WPA 1930s work project to put people back in Newark back to work. So we want a national jobs program, put people back to work, jobs at a living wage. We say end these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a drag on our economy. We've spent $4 trillion on what does a trillion look like? Somebody in the audience help me understand what a trillion is. A billion is 1,000 million and a trillion is 1,000 billion. So we've spent 4,000 billion or 40,000 million dollars, our tax dollars, on wars that we have not won. We've been in Afghanistan longer than we were in World War II, longer than any other war. And now we're talking about starting a war with Iran. It's crazy. We're going to bankrupt the country on war. So we want to enter the wars. We want to protect workers' rights to unionize and collectively bargain. That's what helped raise wages in this country. Workers at the end of World War II in this country, 47% of American workers were unionized. Today, only 12% of American workers are unionized. And that's one of the reasons that wages are declining. 12%. And now for the first time, more workers unionize in the public sector than in the private sector. Fourth, we want a moratorium, a 3 to 5 year moratorium on home foreclosures. Stop throwing people in the street. Those houses sit boarded up and idle. That's not making nobody no money. Leave the people in the houses. Give them a chance to breathe. Give them a break so their money. Look, if
bail them out.
That's right. Bail out the people. You know, the fifth thing, we want universal health care for everybody, just like all the other industrial nations. Stop the attack on our public schools, the layoffs, the budget cuts, the privatization of our public schools. We're downgrading education instead of upgrading education. How can we have well-trained workers if our schools are not the best possible schools? And then lastly, we say make college education affordable and end debt slavery for these young people who are coming out of college. There's a bill, the Clark Amendment, in the House right now to forgive all student debt. we support that bill. And it's very important that people don't think their voices count, but they really, now is the time to write letters, to call, telegrams, whatever you can do, talk in person to your congressional representatives, and let them know that we don't like the course that we're on. We need a new economic course, and that at least start with some kind of jobs program. In fact, Senator Lautenberg has a bill in right now called the 21st Century WPA bill. Hillenbrand has the Urban Youth Jobs Act. St. John Conyers has a full employment bill, HR 870. And there are a number of pieces of legislation. We support them all, but in the final analysis, we need a comprehensive. Look, the Senate bailed out the banks, trillions of dollars. They couldn't even pass an extension on unemployment last week. The Senate that bailed out the banks said they're too big to fail, gave the people that had money, gave them $1 trillion more money, would not pass the President's Jobs Act.
Which these people kept.
Yes.
What they gave them the money for was to invest it back into the community and help restart the economy. And what did they do? They gave themselves higher raises, bonuses, and kept the rest of the money and did not do what it was intentionally slated for.
And didn't stop there. Not only did they do all that, they turned around and raised every fee that they had, checking accounts, savings account, interest on small business loans, and then, which one was it? Bank of America wanted to impose a $5 per month fee on use of your debit card. But people got so outraged that they had to back up for a minute. So it just shows you, if people get outraged, like people were going down to Bank of America, taking their money out. I'm going to another bank that treats me better. That got results.
And you know what? When you just said that, it reminded me of the late Donald Tucker.
Yes.
And that was something that if you were not for the people, then you were against the people.
That's right.
And I remember sitting at numerous conferences and council meetings where he would ask a question: how do the residents of Newark benefit? And if you couldn't tell him within the first 5 sentences how the people of Newark were going to benefit, your deal was dead.
Yes.
And we need to get back into looking at how do you help the people instead of helping corporations. I have nothing against a corporation making money.
Right.
That's what they're in business for.
Right.
But it shouldn't come at the hand and at the cost of me
Right.
or you.
Right.
You know, and that's what's happening.
Right.
Housing market. Most people that lost their house with the collapse of the housing industry, those realtors knew up front. Those banks knew up front that those people could not afford those mortgages.
That's right.
And that balloon payment.
It was a scam.
Yeah, exactly. It was a scam. And then the banks and the financial institutions that were responsible for doing that, those were the ones that were aided in cleaning up their mess.
Yes.
And now the houses, like you said, you can go right here in Newark and ride around and see how houses that are boarded up.
Newark has one of the highest foreclosure rates in the state, followed closely, if not surpassed, by the city of Irvington. I heard the city of Irvington has a 40% foreclosure rate. Look, there were so many foreclosures in Baltimore that the city of Baltimore sued Wachovia, because Wachovia was the largest holder of mortgages in the city of Baltimore. I mean, if people lose their homes, what happens? They don't pay their property taxes. And if property taxes are not raised, the city doesn't have what? Revenue for what? Fire, police, sanitation, the basic services. It's a domino effect. It's an economic domino effect. And we really have to do everything we can to put the country on another direction. We have to use our votes, vote for people. I hope people see that we cannot let some of these crazy people get in the White House
you're bringing up a really good point, because voting right now, everybody thinks it's a federal law that you have the right to vote, but the state, a lot of people are not paying attention
It's under
to
attack.
the fact that the state actually has the last word in whether or not you get to vote.
That's
and I've even been challenged.
Right.
Lived in the same community my whole life and get challenged going to the poll because somebody knows that I may not be voting for that particular candidate.
Yes.
You know, so there's so much more that we need to talk about, but we really don't have that much time to talk about it. But I have to ask this question.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
What keeps you motivated to do this?
Well, truthfully, I grew up like you did in the struggle. I mean, we are children of the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and we were shaped by those movements. I mean, I think as a foundation, the underlying values that my parents gave me of being fair and caring about other people. I didn't come from a real political family, but you know, you got the basics. You know, treat people like you would want to be treated. Right. And what's going on today is that they are not treating the people at the top are not treating the people under them the way they want to be treated. It's very, very selfish and very greedy, and we have to make a change.
Well, I wish you the best of, you know, I will keep you in prayer, and anything that we can do to help, I want you to come back and let us continue this dialogue about how can we save America, and not just America, but the world. So I look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Thank
and,
you.
You know, continue the work in helping other people do and get out of the struggle that we're in. So I thank you for allowing us to come into your homes one more time. And this has been very informative for me, and I hope it was for you too. And I just say thank you and God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.